There's a generation that often goes unnoticed. Not fully Gen X, not fully Millennial. They called Xennials. The micro-generation born roughly between the late 1970s and early 1980s. They grew up in an analog childhood but entered childhood in a digital world. If you remember cassette tapes, dial-up internet, handwritten letters, and the early days of social media, you might belong to this generation. But what makes Xennials psychologically unique? Let's explore. The core psychology of Xennials was shaped by transition. They grew up in a slower world where patience was required. You had to wait for phone calls, wait for photos to be developed, wait for information. Because of this, many developed a high tolerance for delay and frustration. But as they entered adulthood, the world changed rapidly. The rise of the internet, smartphones, social media, globalization. So they adapted. The result, the mindset that understands both patience and speed. Xennials tend to balance realism with flexibility. They value stability, but they're not afraid of innovation. Unlike older generations who may resist change, our younger ones fully embrace disruption. Xennials often stand in the middle. They think long-term, but they're willing to evolve. They were raised with the idea that loyalty and hard work lead to success. But they also witnessed layoffs, economic recessions, and the collapse of guaranteed career paths. So psychologically, they developed a dual mindset. They crave security, but they also know nothing is permanent. This often makes them strong leaders and mediators in the workplace. They understand traditional structure, but they can also navigate digital transformation. Having lived through massive technological, economic, and cultural shifts, Xennials often develop emotional flexibility. They've had to reinvent themselves more than once. They understand uncertainty, not just theoretically, but experientially. And because of that, many possess quiet resilience. One subtle psychological experience among Xennials is the sense of being in between. Older generation, they may feel too progressive. With younger ones, they may feel slightly traditional. This can create identity reflection, but it also builds empathy. They tend to understand multiple perspectives because they've lived through multiple eras. Xennials often carry deep nostalgia, not just as memory but as emotional regulation. When the modern world feels overwhelming, they return to familiar music, films, routines. It's not escapism, it's grounding. Their past reminds them of who they are. However, constant change can also be exhausting. From analog childhood to digital adulthood. From stable career expectations to unpredictable markets, adaptation has been constant. Some Xennials quietly carry what we might call adaptation fatigue. They are strong, but they're tired of always adjusting. As many Xennials enter midlife, deeper questions emerge. Did they choose the right path? What does success really mean now? Who am I beyond responsibilities? Because they've seen traditional definitions of success shift, they often redefine it for themselves. Less about status, more about meaning. Xennials may not always seek attention, but they often become stabilizers in families and organizations. They bridge communication gaps. They understand offline relationships and online culture. They lead not loudly, but steadily. Perhaps the greatest psychological strength of Xennials is cognitive flexibility. They can hold two truths at once: traditional and progress, security and risk, nostalgia and innovation. They are not stuck in the past, but they don't erase it either. In a world that keeps accelerating, Xennials remind us that growth doesn't mean abandoning where we came from. It means integrating it. Their story is not about being the loudest generation. It's about being the bridge between eras, between mindsets, between ways of living. And sometimes the bridge is what keeps everything connected. One of the most defining psychological tensions for Xennials is the pull between stability and freedom. They were raised to believe in structure, get a degree, find a stable job, stay loyal, build security. But they entered adulthood during a time when those promises began to crack. Corporate downsizing, the rise of startups, freelance culture, digital entrepreneurship. So internally, many Xennials live with a quiet contradiction. They want safety, but they also want autonomy. This creates a subtle mental negotiation that follows them through career decisions, relationships, and even lifestyle choices. Like younger generations who may openly discuss burnouts, Xennials often internalize it. They were raised to push through, to endure, to be responsible. So when exhaustion comes, it doesn't always look dramatic. It looks like quiet stress, emotional withdrawal, overthinking at night, questioning whether they're doing enough. Because they learned resilience early. They sometimes forget they're allowed to rest. Many Xennials now find themselves in what psychologists call the sandwich stage of life. Supporting aging parents, raising children, managing careers, paying mortgages. They are caretakers in multiple directions. And while they are capable, the weight can feel invisible. Rarely complain loudly, but internally, the responsibility can feel immense. Xennials didn't grow up with social media. They adapted to it. This creates a unique psychological awareness. They remember privacy before oversharing. They remember boredom before constant scrolling. So many Xennials experience technology with both appreciation and skepticism. They use it, but they question it. They adopt, but they are not fully absorbed by it. Because they grew up before curated online identities, Xennials often value authenticity over visibility. They are less concerned with appearing successful and more concerned with feeling connected. In friendships and partnerships, loyalty matters, consistency matters, showing up matters. Their relationships may not always be loud on social media, but they are often steady in real life. There is something powerful about Xennials. They are not afraid of starting over, had to learn new technologies, adapt to new economic systems, redefine success. So even when midlife brings uncertainty, many of them carry the psychological capacity to pivot. They may not broadcast their invention, but they do it. Slowly, thoughtfully, strategically. Because they've witnessed rapid cultural shifts, Xennials tend to hold complex perspectives. They understand why older generations resist change. They understand why younger generations demand it. This layered awareness often develops into emotional intelligence. They don't rush to extremes. They observe, they process, they weigh both sides. Beneath the resilience, there is often an unspoken fear. What if I'm falling behind? In a world of constant comparison and accelerated success stories, even the most stable Xennial can feel pressure. But what makes them unique is this: they measure progress differently, not just by speed, but by sustainability. As they mature, many Xennials quietly redefine success. It's no longer just about titles or income. It becomes about freedom, mental peace, healthy relationships, purpose. They begin to ask, does this life feel aligned? Does it feel meaningful? This reflective depth is one of their strongest psychological traits. If there's one word that captures the psychology of Xennials, it is integration. They integrate past and present, analog and digital, security and change, responsibility and self-discovery. They are not extreme. They are balanced. And in a polarized world, balance is power. The story of Xennials is not dramatic. It is steady. It is the story of a generation that learned to adapt without losing its roots, that learned technology without forgetting human connection, that carries nostalgia not as escape but as identity. They may not always be the loudest voice in the room, but often they are the ones holding the room together. In a world that keeps accelerating, Xennials remind us that wisdom is not about moving the fastest. It's about knowing when to move and when to pause. And sometimes the generation in between is the one that understands both directions best. If this perspective resonated with you, if you saw yourself somewhere in this story, take a moment to like this video. It helps more than you know. And if you enjoy deep conversations about psychology, identity, and the hidden patterns behind how we think and live, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. This channel is a space for reflection, growth, and understanding, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video.